Hello there. Welcome into a Tuesday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the Extra Sports 1300 app to do your listening. In that app, which is free to download and free to use, is sponsored by Diversus Health. Mental health and well-being for all. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics await you over the course of the program. I'd love to get your thoughts at 719-247-1313. You can call or text them in. The primary topic of conversation, as you might imagine, is more of the post-mortem, if you will, when it comes to the Denver Broncos and their loss against Jacksonville. And because of the timing of it all, it has created quite the interesting scenario over the next 2 weeks. And we'll get into that and all the machinations of these AFC playoffs a little bit later. We want to talk about the NFC with the 49ers' big win last night. Big in terms of margin, but also in terms of importance. Have we talked about the 49ers potentially being the number one seed in the NFC? We should be. But let's start with the Broncos, not to go too far off track. So as is pretty plain to see if you were watching the game on Sunday, the Broncos defense was not what you expect them to be. And it starts my mind wandering a little bit. Then you think back to the Green Bay game. And you go, and this is the type of perspective you have when you have multiple games, right? How trends shift, how a direction of a team is moving. So you look at the Green Bay game and you kind of look at it and you say, well, it's Jordan Love. It's a supremely talented offensive team. You know, they're going to get theirs. But then you couple it with the Jacksonville game and you still say, okay, talented quarterbacks, talented offenses. But you're like, this is now back-to-back games, if not for Pat Surtain's interception, that completely changed that Green Bay game. You start to wonder what would have come of it. And then I took it one step further. Because I said, I think I've seen this before. Late in the season, all of a sudden, the Broncos defense is not quite looking right. This happened last year. The Broncos, remember, their defense started to be a little bit leaky. They started to get torn up a little bit. You think about, the Jameis Winston-led Browns and the revenge game Jerry Jeudy had. And then the next week it was okay against Indianapolis, but then Joe Burrow and T. Higgins happen. And then here comes week 18. They're playing Carson Wentz. It's a nothing game. All right, they win that. And then they get blown out by Josh Allen. Some people look at the 7 that the Broncos scored in that playoff game rather than the 35. Like, the Broncos defense didn't have a great game against the Buffalo Bills either. Now, in the NFL, you got to score more than 7 points if you're going to win a game, and I think that's why most people's focus went to that number. But you don't win a lot of games when your defense gives up 35. We're starting to see the same trend this year. Now, it's been a mix with decent quarterbacking, good quarterbacking, Love, Lawrence, but also kind of mediocre quarterbacking in Marcus Mariota and Geno Smith. But here are the facts. For the season, the Broncos allowed the 8th fewest red zone trips. Just trips. We know they've been outstanding up until Sunday when it comes to defending the red zone. 8th fewest red zone trips for opponents overall this season. Last 3 games, 9th most. And then obviously the 5 red zone trips that Jacksonville had, which was the 4th most of any NFL team this weekend. Last year, overall, they allowed the 6th fewest trips into the red zone by opponents. And the last 3 games of last season, 9th most. Points per game. Overall, Broncos obviously have been good. They're on average holding teams under 20 points. You're going to win a lot of football games that way. Top 5. Last 3 games, they've allowed almost a full touchdown more per game. And obviously the increased red zone trips would be a corollary to the points per game going up for their opponents. Last year, the points per game went up. Not as much, but it still went up from what it was through most of the season. Quarterback rating that the Broncos defense has allowed has gone up in the last 3 weeks 14 points. Or whatever, 14 I guess it's points. Is that what we say with quarterback rating? The number's gotten bigger by 14. That's a big jump. So what you saw last year from the Denver Broncos defense down the stretch, you're seeing it again. So the why? My theory, and you could give me your thoughts at 719-247-1313. They're tired. The Broncos defense is tired. Because some other metrics that have kept up throughout the season, their blitz rate, right? They're a top 5 blitzing team in the NFL. And the fact that their offense hasn't been doing them a ton of favors, as Sean Payton pointed out just an hour or so ago.
It's a good offense we played, and man, we didn't do enough on our side of the ball. You know, our numbers third down wise. So that wasn't just one phase of our team. You know, we got beat. We talked about it, and then we get the corrections made, and then we get on to the next game.
So you have a defense that blitzes a lot, that is on the field a lot, and has gone up against the last 2 weeks a couple of pretty good quarterbacks. And I think that's why you see those factors playing into why the Broncos defense does not look quite as good recently as it has for much of the season. And what would be, other than the numbers, what would be visual proof, visual evidence of what I theorize? How about missed tackles? Would missed tackles be an acceptable piece of visual evidence to say that a defense is a little bit tired? I think it is. And you saw many a missed tackle against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think this defense is getting tired, and I think they are wearing down. which is not a good thing when you're getting ready for the postseason. Now, it does make getting that number one seed all the more important, right? Because now one thing that you could use, they say that rest is a weapon. One thing you can use is that bye week to rest this defense. And it would also help if you're looking at the next 3 weeks in the macro, putting on a pretty good performance against a Kansas City Chiefs team that has absolutely quit. That would help too. Now, week 18, can't do anything about week 18. Because it looks like that game's going to mean something. We'll see what happens this week and recalibrate come Monday. But that's going to be an intense football game against another very good quarterback in Justin Herbert. So you can't do anything about that. But you can do something about this Kansas City game to make it a little bit easier on your defense. And you can do something by taking care of business the next 2 weeks by giving them a break during the wild card round. But we saw this with the Denver Broncos. I mean, you can, say, oh, Burrow, and it's easy in the moment to kind of look, oh, well, Joe Burrow and T. Higgins, and they picked on Riley Moss, and, it's easy to kind of look at that game and say that, but don't forget the Browns and Jerry Jeudy lit up the Denver Broncos. And I know Anthony Richardson didn't do a ton against them, but Jonathan Taylor did. So there were signs last year beyond just, hey, this week they're playing a very good quarterback, where the Broncos defense looked a little bit less than what they have been. And here's another big factor, I think, in all of this, too, going back to how different that Green Bay game is if Pat Surtain doesn't make that interception. That is something the Broncos don't do a lot of. Right? We've talked about their inability to create turnovers. What's an easy way for the defense to put a stop to a drive and get off the field? Turn the other team over. The Broncos are not one of the better teams, far from it, of creating turnovers. So you can look at the offense as Sean Payton is, and certainly placing some blame there and saying, hey, the offense isn't staying on the field long enough. But it's that complementary football, this time in not a great way, of, well, the defense isn't getting off the field and the offense is getting off the field quickly, and it's leading to this defense, I think, again, wearing down at the most important part of the season. Because I'll get into this later with looking at where the AFC playoff picture sits right now. It's kind of an all or nothing proposition. The Broncos got to win these two games, both of these two games, or they're staring at certainly not having home field. But they're looking at the potential, depending on how the Chargers and Texans game goes this weekend, of not even being at home to start the playoffs. And then you lose out on that bye week, that week of rest, to try and get your defense the rest that, in my opinion, they so desperately need right now. So we saw what last year culminated in. in that first round of the playoffs against the Buffalo Bills. Some of the same signs exist for this Broncos team. And the question is, with 2 weeks remaining, can they reverse that? And can they do the most important thing, I believe, which is getting that number one seed? 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on Broncos Jacksonville or the bigger picture with Denver. All of a sudden, 2 weeks left, and the Broncos are, I don't want to say they're scrapping because they are in the catbird seat, but there's some serious consequences if they do not take care of business the next 2 weeks. 719-247-1313. What would be a good way to remedy some of this from an offensive standpoint? I got an idea, and I'll share it with you next here on Extra Sports 1300. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to jump aboard. Talking mostly Broncos today, which is exactly what Douglas wants to discuss. Douglas, good to have you, buddy. Fire away.
Yeah, my question is, what are your thoughts on the Pat Bryant situation with that player? Do you think he should be suspended for that mean hit on Pat Bryant? And what's your thoughts on the PJ Locke situation? That's possibly a suspension, is what the league is reviewing on.
Let me ask you before I answer, Douglas, do you believe that PJ Locke or the player for the Jaguars should be, let's say, a fine? We can maybe say that that's unfair, but we're really talking suspension, right? Because that's what's going to take these guys off the field. Do you think either hit should be punishable with a suspension?
Well, the one hit that caused the injury to Pat Bryant should have been a suspension, because that was looking like a helmet-to-helmet, which the NFL is trying to get rid of.
Mm-hmm. And as far as PJ Locke?
And the PJ Locke, I think maybe just a fine, because it looked clean.
Okay. I appreciate the call, Douglas. Call more often. Show's better when I get call-ins. Respectfully, I will agree with you and I will disagree with you, Douglas. The hit on Pat Bryant, unfortunately, is 100% on Bo Nix. And Bo Nix knew it in the moment that he served up a hospital ball. And not to make light of it at all. And it's great to hear that Pat Bryant was discharged from the hospital and all that stuff. I'm glad, because the last thing you want to see is somebody suffer a serious injury. But that play was on Bo Nix. And they talked about it on the Fox broadcast. The trust that receivers put on their quarterback to make sure that they're not leading them into exactly what Bo Nix led Pat Bryant into. Now, it was not a helmet-to-helmet hit. It wasn't. And that was the second time that there was a hit that people thought was helmet-to-helmet. The hit on Lil Jordan Humphrey should not have been flagged. It is an incredibly dangerous throw that Bo Nix made, and it is incredibly unfortunate what happened to Pat Bryant. But that was a clean hit to me by the Jacksonville player. There is a gray area here where we can talk about, the defender being aware that pass was too high, and did he have to, lay him out? To me, the bottom line is, was it a clean hit? And it was. And where is the fault here? Is the fault on the Jacksonville player? Do you put it on him, or do you put it on Bo Nix for throwing that pass? So I'm glad that the damage done was not worse. And by the way, Pat Bryant did not practice, or would not have practiced yesterday. If they had practice, according to the theorized injury report, the Jacksonville players should not face discipline of any kind. I know we only care about suspensions because we care about whether the guys are on the field. We don't, unfortunately, care about their wallets unless they make too much money, and then we gripe about it. I don't think he should be fined. Now, as far as the hit on Trevor Lawrence, which, if you don't recall, the play was blown dead because of a false start. PJ Locke ran unblocked, which he was going to be anyway. Right? The Broncos, I just talked about how much they blitzed. They were blitzing, and they brought PJ Locke up from the safety position to rush on the blind side of Trevor Lawrence. Play is blown dead for a false start. Locke continues and nails Trevor Lawrence square in the back. It looked to me like Trevor Lawrence knew it was a false start, and I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to PJ Locke. The flag, and I just went back and looked at it, I think the flag was thrown from the far side, the opposite side of PJ Locke. And with how loud that stadium is, I think that PJ Locke just simply did not know that the play had been blown dead. And he was running 100 miles an hour at Trevor Lawrence. So, again, it's kind of like the Jacksonville hit. Is there a gray area where, PJ Locke should see that Trevor Lawrence is holding up? Like, I just don't want to put that on defensive players. Again, another unfortunate circumstance, which, by the way, was flagged. It was flagged on the field, and it led to a Jacksonville touchdown. I think enough justice has been done for that hit by PJ Locke. I don't think he deserves more punishment than that. Now, I don't memorize the NFL rule book, so I can't tell you if that's an automatic fine, regardless of intent and all of that kind of stuff. But just adjudicating it myself, I'm not going to put it on PJ Locke that he saw an opportunity when a play was blown dead to blow up Trevor Lawrence. I think he felt like he had an opportunity to blow up Trevor Lawrence before the play because he knew he was going to be rushing him unblocked. But I don't think that PJ Locke saw the flag or heard the whistle and said, I can still go and hit this guy and have plausible deniability. So I guess, Douglas, long story long, I disagree with you on the hit on Pat Bryant, and I agree with you on PJ Locke. 719-24-7, 1313. There are certainly many Jaguar fans, as you might imagine, calling for serious punishment to PJ Locke. I saw some stuff about like he pretended he didn't hear the whistle. I mean, I don't fault anybody that roots for the Jaguars for saying something like that. But we can kind of have the other side. What did Sean Payton implore the fans to do? Make that stadium incredibly loud. And they did it. All the more reason because of how wild the Empower Field crowd can get that the Broncos need to play as many home playoff games as they can. I think it is entirely possible, if not probable, that PJ Locke had no idea that play had been blown dead. He had his mind made up on what he was doing. He knew he had to get there fast. The false start happened, was flagged on the other side, and Trevor Lawrence still dropped back. Like there's a split second where it looks like Lawrence stopped. I think PJ Locke, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. That's what I'm going to do. But great questions, Douglas. Again, call more often if you have thoughts on either the hit PJ Locke on Trevor Lawrence or the hit that had Pat Bryant carted off on a stretcher. Thankfully, in terms of NFL injuries, it's not as serious as it could be for the Broncos rookie wide receiver. I'll take your thoughts, 719-24-7-1313. After this, get back to the issue at hand with the Denver Broncos. Their defense appears to be wearing down a bit. What can the offense do to help them out? That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Anyone else blame Lewis Hamilton for Sunday's loss? Anybody? First time that Formula One driver and part owner of the Denver Broncos shows up to a game and the Broncos have maybe their worst loss of the season? Or flip it around, what is Lewis Hamilton thinking? I mean, he's British, right? What team goes over to England constantly to play? The Jaguars. Was there never an opportunity for Lewis Hamilton to buy into the Jags? Was he watching that game on Sunday and going, man, I could have invested in the other team? No one's blaming Lewis Hamilton. Okay. Fair enough. I mean, the Broncos have had mixed results with Condoleezza Rice and Lewis Hamilton 0-1. Don't let him be at Week 18 game. It means too much. Like, file this under not superstitious, but little stitious. Just to be safe, Lewis Hamilton don't show up Week 18. Test the theory a little bit here. Aaron called in during the break, brought up the other one, the other call that was questionable in the eyes of Broncos fans, and that was Malcolm Roach. And he was called for putting the on Trevor Lawrence. Like that, there's no debating that. That's a rule. But there is no rule in the NFL that more shows the preferential treatment that quarterbacks get than that. He's big 350 pounds or 300, 325, whatever they are. He's gone. It's amazing that they are as fast as they are and they can get to a quarterback as quickly as they can. And then you're asking him, don't put your entire body weight on him. Like, to me, there is no rule in the NFL that shows how much the NFL protects its quarterback. And the fact that Malcolm Rhodes got to Trevor Lawrence fair and square, and now he's got to fall like a way to do it. But still, like that, when that gets called, I just go, oh, yeah, we're protecting quarterbacks around here, which I'm fine with. Like, nobody, with all due respect, unless they're like some novelty, like 44-year-old Philip Rivers or 40-year-old Joe Flacco, although both can still play a little bit. I mean, he went out for Philip Rivers, but he started the game very well. Unless it's a novelty, we really don't like to see that. Right? You don't want to see jokes. Now, I could make a case that the Broncos offense will run very close to the same way. I don't think that there is a massive drop-off between Bo Nix and Jared Stevens, but you still don't want to see them. And the Broncos are kind of different in that they have a very good backup quarterback and they paid the price for it. Like Jared Stidham's one of the richer backup quarterbacks in the NFL. He's well compensated. Not every team has that. And certainly you're going to see how big of a drop off. There is no place in the NFL right now where you're going to witness the disparity between QB1 and not QB1 than on Thursday night. Because I watched that Chiefs-Titans game. Oh, my God. If the Broncos cannot absolutely terrorize Chris Oladokun on Thursday, then just pack it up. Don't even play the Charger game. Don't expect the playoff and like say we're done. Because I watched that look, he's gonna have a short week, but longer to prepare than he did to come in for Gardner Minshew. My goodness. I mean, even going from Mahomes to Minshew, it's crazy. Going from Mahomes to Philadelphia, yikes. With all due respect, of course. Speaking of quarterbacks, well, aside the football that quarterbacks playing, played this audio from Sean Payton earlier. If you missed it, here it is, because my opening thought today is that we are seeing the Broncos defense wear down like we saw the Broncos defense wear down last year. And part of the reason, as Sean Payton pointed out, is that the offense, especially against Jacksonville, wasn't doing them any favor.
Good offense we played, and man, we didn't do enough on our side of the ball. You know, our numbers third down wise. So that wasn't just one phase of our team. We got beat. We talked about it, and then we get the corrections made, and then we get on to the next game.
So, and he's right, especially on Sunday. But you've noticed it in fits and spurts over the last month or so of the season, that the Broncos offense not converting on third down, punting, and here comes the Broncos defense again. There have been times where it feels like the Broncos defense is on the field a lot, and the numbers would kind of back you up on that. Not so much the Green Bay game, but again, looking at the bigger picture, look at the last month, 5 games, and you're seeing that. Now, there are two things that the Broncos offense can do to kind of, do their part and help that out. One is obvious, I think. I think they got to make a concerted effort, and I feel like I've said this a lot over the last few weeks, but it still applies. They got to get RJ Harvey the ball more. They got, or just run the ball more. RJ Harvey's the clear number one running back, so that's why I say run RJ Harvey, but they got to run the ball. Now, just looking at the Jacksonville game, you'll see the number of carries RJ Harvey got, and you'll go, that's not enough. And I would agree with you. But there are a few factors that you have to take into account. One is the fact that RJ Harvey, even though he was cleared medically, did get banged up in the last game. So how much was his workload tied to that? And the other part of this, too, is you could feel that game because of the points that Jacksonville was putting up. It felt like the Denver Broncos had to keep up by throwing the football. It just felt that way. Right? You're down. Your mind goes to, we got to throw the football, and Sean Payton did that. But I went back and looked at some of the third downs. In the first half, when the Broncos started to fall behind, because that could be another spot where you say run the football more, right? Keep Jacksonville's offense off the field. Broncos faced 3 or 4 third and long in the first half. Right? Those are automatic throwing down. So you're cutting down the number of opportunities that you can run RJ Harvey. Then you get behind. Then you have to play catch up. Now you can't run the ball as much. Time is of the essence. So there's a little bit of that, but there were 2 situations. And this isn't so much the idea of keeping the Broncos defense off the field. This is just where maybe running the football could have helped the Broncos try and win that football game. So Twice late in that game, as you recall, the Broncos down 34-17. Okay, they get it first and goal from the 9, and they proceed to throw the football 4 times. Right? Next drive, they have a 3rd and 2. They throw it, incomplete, 4th down. Bo Nix stares down his receiver and throws the pick. Feels like you could have mixed in a run on some of these. And the Broncos did not. Now, you could also say that, running the football and getting, and even if you're stopped, then the clock runs a little bit and your defense can rest. But again, we're talking about the Broncos in catch-up mode. So bringing those two up, it's mostly about, hey, RJ Harvey was incredibly effective in that game on limited carries. Why not test that with an extra carry or two? And it felt like down near the goal line, I know they're playing catch up, but you're near the goal line. You're inside the 10-yard line. Feels like there should have been a run mixed in there. And then late in the game, when it was probably already decided, but a late touchdown does make things a little bit more interesting. You have a 3rd and 2. You know it's 4-down territory. You throw on 3rd down and on 4th down. Could one of those have been a run? So the RJ Harvey thing, one, is against Kansas City, against LA. That can be a recipe to keep the Broncos defense off the field, right? Run the ball more. Give RJ Harvey more than 7 touches. But it also can apply to help you win the game, as it felt like the play calling left something to be desired late in the game when the Broncos could have maybe made a comeback, but at least made it more interesting. Which leads into something that Sean Payton has pointed out the last couple of days. At the time when he said it after the game, you kind of glossed over it if you watched, or I certainly glossed over it, didn't think much about it. And then he reiterated and elaborated yesterday. This is what he said on Sunday.
We got to look at what we're doing. We got to make sure we're not doing too much. And we've got to do that all in a quick turnaround.
Got to make sure we're not doing too much. Of all the things in that game that come to your mind that you want to hear Sean Payton talk about, that comment was just kind of in one ear, out the other. Then yesterday, he elaborates on it, and he's basically talking about the passing game and saying that guys are trying to do too much. And by guys, there's one guy in particular that you can certainly believe that Sean Payton is talking about, and that's his quarterback. Maybe going outside the game plan, maybe breaking off a route because you think you can get a bigger play. Like, when I hear trying to do too much, I think of the Broncos trying to get back to what they were able to do against Green Bay. Right? That was fun. Everybody enjoyed it. Right? Broncos with a lot of big plays, a lot of explosives. That's not who the Broncos are. They broke format, if you will, because the opponent warranted it. And as the Jacksonville game wore along, that certainly applies as well. But earlier in the game, when the Broncos were falling behind, was there some of this happening? Were guys trying to break off big plays? Was Bo Nix looking for the big play rather than taking the play that was right in front of him? I think about that 4th down where he threw the pick. That's doing too much. it looked like as he was getting ready to throw the football, somebody was breaking free underneath, which would have given the Broncos a first down. Wouldn't have put them in the end zone. And it seemed like Bo Nix wanted the bigger play. They needed 2 yards. Bo Nix wanted like 20. So I think that's what Sean Payton is referring to. That the Broncos, because they deviated from what they normally do offensively and it worked against Green Bay, the idea that you should just keep doing that. And what Sean Payton is saying, no, we've established our identity. Every once in a while, we got to be more. We got to do more. We got to make adjustments and all that kind of stuff. That's what good teams do. And that's what they did against Green Bay. But it doesn't mean that's who you are now. And maybe the Broncos felt like the Green Bay game was some kind of watershed moment, and now you're going to get a more dynamic, explosive Denver Broncos offense. But the doing too much can also apply to Sean Payton. And to his credit, I know it sounds like coach speak, but I think in this regard or in this situation, I believe him that he's not just giving it lip service. I do think he has some culpability in this. Maybe he was trying to do too much at times. And I feel like when you have a running back that, to RJ Harvey's credit, has been productive, you know, the worries about what this team's going to be able to do without J.K. Dobbins, you don't have either you don't have those concerns or you certainly aren't as concerned as maybe you were when J.K. Dobbins was injured. But you have a back that is proven to be productive, that you can rely on him more than you did for much of the season. And yet, first and goal from the 9, no run plays, 2 downs to get 2 yards, both pass plays. So I think Sean Payton is pointing the thumb and the finger. I think he's saying that his players are looking for a big play, Bo Nix most notably, when they shouldn't be. And I think there are times where Sean Payton, and smart people tend to do this, overthink things. Try to do too much, try to get too cute. The good news is it should be very easy for the Denver Broncos to get back to their identity and it be successful. Right? I don't feel like on Thursday there's going to be a lot of moments where you're like, man, if the Broncos can't dial up a big play here. Charger game's a different story. But for Thursday, I think it will be, you could call Thursday a lot of things. I think get right game comes immediately to mind. But how about getting, and Bo Nix kind of talked about this, right? Like getting you back in the right mindset. I think playing the loss against Jacksonville, but also having a game against Kansas City where you don't overlook them, you don't get too overconfident, but just a level of we could play our way and we can win this game comfortably and we don't have to do too much and we can kind of get back to who we are and then get ready for the Chargers and see what that game brings. 719-24-7, 1313. Coming up next, it's a weekly tradition now because we are this late in the season, a look at the AFC playoffs and why it is all or nothing for the Denver Broncos these last 2 weeks. Welcome in hour 2 on this Tuesday. Glad to have you. Appreciate you watching the show on our social media platforms, whether it be YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. The handle is the same in all of those places. Just put that funky little @ sign and put XTRA Sports 1300. And while you're there, like, subscribe, follow, and most importantly, leave a comment, and I'll get to them. It works just as good as the phone and text line. Get to it on air. Of course, the phone line and the text line are still available to you at all times at 719-247-1313. Now, if the Denver Broncos were to have lost, I don't know, a month ago, I think there would be a feeling of plenty of time, can recover, they'll be all right. But because they lost and because of who they lost to, a team that is right in the thick of things in the AFC, it has created a situation where it's kind of an all or nothing, proposition. And what I mean by that, the all or nothing, it's not that they're going to either make the playoffs or miss them. But now that the Broncos have kind of held the number 1 seed for a little while now, wouldn't you hate to lose that? Wouldn't it feel like a failure on some level, given what the Broncos have done all season, for them to stub their toe at the finish line and not get the number 1 seed? And the thing, too, is they're in a situation where it's not even like they would grab the 2nd seed. And that's why I say all or nothing. It's not really all or nothing, but it's you get the number 1 seed, you get the bye week that I think this team desperately needs, you get home field, which is a huge advantage for the Denver Broncos in the postseason, or your path to the Super Bowl becomes a winding one. So as we sit currently, Denver Broncos still with the number 1 seed, right? Pats 2, Jags 3, Steelers 4, Chargers 5, Bills 6, Texans 7. But where it gets very interesting is if the Chargers lose to the Texans this weekend, which I believe is a game you can hear here on Extra Sports 1300 plug. If Houston beats LA, games in LA, but it's very possible that Houston could beat LA. Certainly. But if LA beats Houston, now week 18 means a whole lot, because the Broncos could lose the number 1 seed, home field, the division. Basically, if the Chargers win and then Denver turns around next week and loses to the Chargers, the Broncos would fall from 1 to 5, and they wouldn't even be at home to start the playoffs. They'd be going to Pittsburgh, which it's kind of funny, as much as you would look at that as, a bummer at the very least, a failure of some proportion at most. You'd be looking at the Broncos' first round opponent and going, okay, that's about the softest landing you can have. And then the reality of, but they have to go to Pittsburgh, and the very real possibility that they would have to win multiple 3 road games to get to a Super Bowl. Very difficult to do. But for that 1 week, you'd be feeling, I think, pretty good, as you should, about the chances of the Denver Broncos to get to the second round. But going from the first seed to the fifth seed, that's a big drop. Now, if the Chargers lose to Houston and then Denver loses to the Chargers, they would end up with the third seed, still be division champions. And I'm making some assumptions that the Patriots do not stumble against the Jets, and Miami and the Jaguars don't stumble against Indianapolis and Tennessee. Giving them the same amount of respect as I am giving the Denver Broncos to say that the game in 48 hours, little more than 48 hours from now, should not be a problem for Denver. We are talking about Week 18. That's where the significance lies. Now the Broncos fall to the third seed, open up at home, but now you have Houston. Which it would be under this scenario, a team that just beat the Chargers a couple of weeks prior. And one of the hottest teams in the NFL, a team that we all left for dead, and all of a sudden is now threatening for even a division title. And then the Broncos would be looking at potentially a second round matchup with Jacksonville, except in Jacksonville. So it's the best case scenario is still obviously Broncos get the number one seed. But it's kind of funny. I'm looking at the matchups and I'm saying maybe it would be. It's really arguable what path, if not as the number one seed, would be preferable. And I'll take your thoughts at 719-247-1313 because I think this is a fun little exercise on what you put more stock into. Are you more worried if the Broncos were to fall out of the number one seed? Are you more worried about the fact that they would have to go on the road the whole way through? Or would you be more worried about the potential matchups? Because what we're seeing in the AFC this year, with all of those quarterbacks that we constantly dote on and talk about how great they are, 3/4 of them are not going to be part of the playoff proceedings. No Mahomes, probably no Lamar. One way or another, either the Ravens aren't getting in or, given his recent history, Lamar Jackson's going to be hurt. Burrow's not getting in. Josh Allen's the only one. And I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago. What we are seeing in the AFC, and there are a lot of reasons for it, and I think one of them that's particularly interesting to monitor is whether it is finally catching up to teams that have had to pay lucrative contracts to their quarterbacks. Like, we always have that reaction in the moment. Oh my God, how can you give this quarterback who's not Mahomes or not Allen that much money? But then, does it really impact them? Or better yet, are we seeing how much it's cost Kansas City and Buffalo to pay their quarterbacks the way they're paying them, or Joe Burrow in Cincinnati? It's too early to say yes, that is a turning point, and now it's costing teams that have paid their quarterbacks a ton of money. But it's certainly something to look out for. But whether it's because of that or whether it's just because of a confluence of events that leaves some of the best quarterbacks in this league outside of the playoff picture this year, it feels wide open in the AFC. And when it feels wide open, when the perception is that it is anybody's game, I don't know that home field becomes the determining factor as much as how teams match up with one another. Either the quality or the type of team that you have to go up against, I think, matters more. And this is what we see in the NBA. Right? I'll say it to my dying days that I do not believe, despite the Denver Nuggets running into and being eliminated by the Minnesota Timberwolves, I do not believe that the Timberwolves, all told, are a better basketball team than the Denver Nuggets. But it is a really bad matchup for them, or has been. I think matchups matter more. And I look at, yes, 2 road games, but Pittsburgh and New England as a, and I don't want to say easier, let's say a more preferable road through the postseason than hosting Houston and traveling to Jacksonville. And again, we're talking about if the Broncos do not get the number 1 seed, because there is so many goodies that come along with being the number 1 seed that's obviously, and look, I've said it for a month or more now that I will take the Buffalo Bills no matter the locale. I will take the Buffalo Bills to beat the Denver Broncos if they happen to meet in the postseason. But you have to take your chances if Josh Allen is coming to you. And you have to take your chances by getting the number 1 seed. You just kind of figure it out. You would be insane to entertain any idea of it might be better if the Broncos aren't the number 1 seed, even if it's because they would be meeting Buffalo in their first playoff game. Chances are they're going to have to go through Buffalo if they want to get to a Super Bowl. But if the Broncos, and that could happen, right? Because if the Broncos are the number 1 seed, they will take the lowest remaining seed. And right now, Buffalo is the 6th seed. So unless Houston wins their first round playoff game, if Buffalo wins theirs, which today they would play Jacksonville, they'd be going to Denver the next week if they were able to win. But if they fell from that number 1 seed, whether it's because they still win the division, but they drop a game to the Chargers to get jumped by the Pats and the Jaguars, or if they lose the division completely and end up with the 5th seed, I feel like the 5th seed, slightly better path. Because Houston and Denver beat them, and I said after that game, even if C.J. Stroud plays the entirety of that game, I feel like the Broncos still win it. But that does not mean that adding C.J. Stroud to the conversation, how many more weeks later, would maybe not tip the scales in Houston's favor in the next matchup. Plus, you'd be going up against the pass rush of the Houston Texans again, which is not fun. And then you would be going to a team the next week, if Jacksonville were to take care of their business in the first round, you'd be going to Jacksonville to face a team that presented you some real problems with the way their defense plays and how they create turnovers and the way that Trevor Lawrence has played. But I'll put it out to you, 719-247-1313. If Denver would fall, and I guess that's the first question, given everything now, you got Kansas City on Thursday, you got the Chargers on Sunday, the following Sunday, or maybe Saturday, who knows? The NFL will let us know. But you got Kansas City and you got the Chargers. Do you still feel that the Denver Broncos will get the number 1 seed? And then we can get into, if they do fall from the number 1 seed, would you rather go on the road as a 5th seed to play Pittsburgh, followed by going into Foxborough? Or would you rather host Houston and then go to Jacksonville? Jacksonville and New England will be extremely difficult games. Right? But I go back to, I've seen Trevor Lawrence do it in the postseason before. I haven't seen Drake May. We don't know what playoff Drake May looks like. I think at this point, I would take my chances with the Steelers and the Patriots as opposed to Houston and Jacksonville. Your thoughts, 719-247-1313.
Sports 1300.
Week 17 is going to be jam-packed with football here on Extra Sports 1300. Of course, we got the Christmas game, save for the last one. Rules, what are you going to do? But then things get really interesting on the weekend. On Saturday, I just mentioned how important that Houston-LA game is and how it pertains to the Denver Broncos. The Texans will visit the Chargers, followed by two teams fighting. One team certainly fighting for their playoff lives. I think Green Bay's safe, but they got to get right. They're spiraling. Baltimore traveling to Green Bay. And then Sunday night, who would have thunk? Two teams at the beginning of the season that are vying for the number one seed in the NFC as the Bears travel to the side of this year's Super Bowl, Santa Clara, to take on the San Francisco 49ers. So Houston, LA, Baltimore, Green Bay Saturday, and then the Bears and 49ers on Sunday right here on Extra Sports 1300 and the Extra Sports 1300 app. Let's talk about one of those two teams I mentioned is playing on Sunday for a chance to keep their hopes of the number one seed alive. The Chicago, and there's a lot of machinations with the Chicago Bears, right? And how they get the number one seed. Because right now they're the 2 seed. Seattle's ahead of them by a game. So if San Francisco beats Seattle the last week of the season, would Chicago have the tiebreaker? And then there's Seattle this week. So the Bears, the tie-breaking scenarios, I'm not 100% sure, but the Bears certainly are still playing for the number one seed. San Francisco controls their own destiny for the number one seed. After they absolutely housed Indy last night, the 49ers get the Bears on Sunday and Seattle the following week. If they win both of those games, the San Francisco 49ers will be in the driver's seat to play in their home stadium for the Super Bowl. That is a remarkable sentence. The San Francisco 49ers, who at times this year, many times, have had Mac Jones as their quarterback, have suffered a multitude, a plethora of injuries. And yet, here they stand with 2 weeks left, having everything in front of them. And I said this offseason, do not count out the San Francisco 49ers. Now, did I expect them to be the number one seed or even win their division? No. I was looking in LA's direction for that. But I had the 49ers as a playoff team, and I said, do not give up on this team yet. And the biggest reason is Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan is not going to win the Coach of the Year because that is going to go to Ben Johnson. You look at where the Bears and Caleb were last year and look at where they're at now. I think Ben Johnson is your Coach of the Year, and there's plenty of candidates. Mike Vrabel is a good one on the other side, but who knows? His quarterback might be the MVP of the league. Either way, whether you lean Johnson or lean Vrabel, Kyle Shanahan's not going to win, but he has a dang good case. How this guy I mean, there are levels to this with Kyle Shanahan. So with Mac Jones, and this is not a new thing for Kyle Shanahan. You know what he's done with all the quarterbacks he's had. But to be able to maintain with Mac Jones, keep winning games, beating the Rams in prime time with Mac Jones, keeping the ship afloat, to give the 49ers a chance that when Brock Purdy comes back, that they could potentially get the number 1 seed in the NFC. And then when Brock Purdy comes back, the 49ers offense looks to be as good as there is in the NFL. 5 touchdowns last night for Brock Purdy. And I think there's a Kyle Shanahan appreciation that goes into this, but there's also a Brock Purdy appreciation. Like, I get the conversation about Brock Purdy, and I have him in the mid-tier with a whole bunch of other quarterbacks, the Jared Goffs, the Bo Nixes, on and on. I've regurgitated this list a million times. I don't believe that Brock Purdy is capable of orchestrating an offense without Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle like the one we're seeing right now. I don't believe he's that kind of a quarterback, but we're not. And that's part of the reason why I said don't count out the 49ers, because they haven't lost everybody yet. They still have Trent Williams. They still have George Kittle. They still have Christian McCaffrey. There will come a day where some of those guys will either age out or they won't be able to afford them. But for right now, they're still in that sweet spot where, yeah, they've had to shed some salary. A couple of those guys currently reside on the Denver Broncos roster. But offensively, there are weapons. I know Brandon Ayuk, and what a freak show that's turned into. I know they haven't had Brandon Ayuk, but they still have Kittle. They still have McCaffrey. Not all of the time. But you see the difference. Like, Brock Purdy may not be that guy, the upper echelon elite quarterback in this league, but notice the difference between the San Francisco, and I'm not just talking about last night with the Colts. I'm looking at what Brock Purdy and the 49ers offense has been since he came back from injury. There is a noticeable difference between the level of play that Mac Jones brings to the table and Brock Purdy brings to the table. And you might be saying, no, duh. Trust me, there are plenty of people that when Mac Jones was rolling along were like, maybe we would just be as well off with Mac Jones. No, you would not be as well off. Would you still be able to win games? Yes. Because you did it. Because Kyle Shanahan. But you see how much better the 49ers are when Brock Purdy is out there. So a little appreciation should go to Brock Purdy for what he is as a quarterback. But a whole lot of appreciation needs to go to Kyle Shanahan. Because through injuries, including to the most important position on the field, he has maintained, he has rattled off big wins, and now the 49ers' destiny is in their hands. Beat Chicago at home, beat Seattle Week 18, and you not only are the NFC West champions, the road to the Super Bowl in your house goes through your house. Remarkable. Remarkable. And even someone like me who was not doubting the 49ers, who still believed in the 49ers, I'm still taken aback by how this season has unfolded. Now, this is where I throw a bit of a wet blanket over everything. Even if San Francisco gets the number 1 seed, I think they're incredibly vulnerable. And it's not Brock Purdy, and it's not Kyle Shanahan. Although I know, to many people, Kyle Shanahan is a bit of a question mark when it comes to the postseason. I think ultimately what we see with San Francisco is that the losses they have sustained on the defensive side of the football are ultimately going to be too much to overcome. When you look at the NFC as a whole is far less flawed than the AFC. We can talk about the AFC being fun and wide open and parity and all of these positive terms. What the AFC is a lot of unremarkable football teams. And in the NFC, there are complete football teams. There's the Rams, there's Seattle. I know we do this every year with the Eagles offense. Let me see what Jalen Hurts looks like in the postseason. Let me see what it looks like. But the Eagles, from a roster perspective, complete both sides of the football when they get to the postseason. That has been their history. You have the Rams, you have the Seahawks, you have the Bears now with the emergence of Caleb Williams and the brilliant job that Ben Johnson has done there. I'm not completely out on Green Bay yet, but man, they are teetering. They are spiraling. I look at the AFC and I look at the NFC, and the NFC is superior. They have well put together, all around really good football teams. And if San Francisco was in the AFC, I'd have to think long and hard about whether I would take San Francisco to come out of the AFC. They might be able to. In the NFC, if playoff Jalen Hurts arrives and the Rams are still the Rams and the Seahawks, at some point I'll buy into them. I never quite buy into them, and I have egg on my face the last 2 years because of it. Or since the Russell Wilson trade. What am I talking about? I've been wrong about Seattle every day since they traded Russell Wilson. I'm finally starting to turn it around and get on the right side of history here with the Seattle Seahawks. And I think it's too early for the Bears to just show up and get through the playoffs, but they're a really good team. I just think there are more minds to navigate in the NFC than there is the AFC. I think I would take San Francisco over. I think I might, as long as they don't sustain another injury between now and the end of the season. I think I would take them over everyone in the AFC except Buffalo. In the NFC, even if they get home field advantage, I still kind of feel like there might be 2, maybe 3 teams that I think can beat San Francisco. And that's not a knock on the 49ers at all. It's like the NBA's Western Conference right now. Like you look at it and you're like, okay, see, Denver, Houston, Minnesota, there's going to be a really good team that's not even going to sniff a championship this year. NFC kind of feels that way. Just in terms of, I don't know that these are historically great teams. Nobody is an Oklahoma City Thunder and just dominating everybody. There's parity in the NFC too, but I just see well-constructed, balanced, well-coached football teams and really good quarterback play in the NFC, and somebody has to be left out. Somebody's going to be going home before they, in some ways, deserve to. Because the NFC, I just think, is that good. But what the San Francisco 49ers are doing is remarkable. And Kyle. It's Kyle. What else do you need to say? 719-247-1313. Back after this. I always think that a good barometer to figure out how much of a sicko you are when it comes to your favorite sport. How do you feel about its all-star festivities? Because if you love it, then you just love anything that is involving that sport. Sean Payton pointed this out today. He took a subtle dig at the powers that be that altered the Pro Bowl. And he's like, now they're having sack races. Like, you got to be a real football sicko to be locked into the Pro Bowl. And it's unfortunate because of how much of a clown show that has become, that the announcement of the Pro Bowl rosters, which should matter, who's competing in the thing, it to me is irrelevant. I know that half the guys on this list aren't even going to show up. So it's hard for me to separate, like, hey, these guys that are being voted into the Pro Bowl, there is a bit of a popularity contest that goes on with this, as every All-Star game, which kind of, already kind of diminishes my enjoyment of it. I'm not going to I thought it was really cool that like Cal Ripken got into the MLB All-Star game when I was like, 14? Like, I thought that was cool. And now I'm 40, and the thought of LeBron James getting voted in to the All-Star game this year is making my blood boil. And it's not because I dislike LeBron, but he is so unbelievably undeserving of going. And it's not his fault. He's been hurt. But I'm just saying, like, people are going to automatically vote him in because it's LeBron and they want to see LeBron. And I get it. If you're at the All-Star game, that's who you want to see. And I get that. But from somebody who's not going to the game, it drives me nuts. Sometimes I wish that the fans, not you, because if you listen to this program or sports talk radio in general, I don't want to make it sound like listening to this program unlocks a higher level of intelligence. Listening to any host on our station unlocks a higher level of intelligence when it comes to sports. Not you, but like casuals. I kind of want them to not, it's the same gripe I hear from well-informed voters at the time the presidential election rolls around. Right? There are people that are like into it and like know the issues, and they go to the ballot box and they cast their vote. It's obviously based on their own self-interest. We all vote in our own self-interest, right? But like, they're just really informed. And if somebody, now I'm traveling into territory I don't want to travel into. Regardless of your affiliation, I think you have to understand that if millions and millions of Americans vote for somebody that they are in some ways qualified to hold that job. All right. Both sides have had their gripes about that over the last, I don't want to get into all of that. But it's kind of the same thing with sports, except it's not, the future of our country. It's a silly little sport. But it drives me nuts when I see a guy that's voted in just because he's LeBron or just because he's KD. Like, I want to get the low information voters away from the ballot box when it comes to all-star games. But how do you do that? You make them take a test before they can punch a ballot? Like, there's no way. Either you take it away from all fans or you leave it to all fans. And given that it's not something that I have been far less passionate about as the years have gone on, I really can't sit here. Who's president affects me, who my elected officials are. I really shouldn't be chastising people who will actually watch or go to the All-Star game or the Pro Bowl for putting in people who are undeserving, because it's for them. It's not for me. I'm not going to watch. What am I getting at? It is an honor for these guys to be picked for the Pro Bowl. Now, hopefully they do right by that honor that has been bestowed upon them and show up for the damn game. But we know that that's not going to happen for everybody. But to be recognized as one of the best, some popularity contests come into play. But for the most part, these are deserving guys. They're always going to be snubs. Can only take so many. But the Broncos got a good representation. And, of course, the first question asked to Sean Payton today was, why didn't this guy make it? They got, 6 Pro Bowlers? Like, my goodness, who else do you want? I didn't even hear who the question was about. Can't be Bo Nix. But they get 6 Pro Bowlers. Benito, Zach Allen, Quinn Meinerz, Pat Surtain, Garrett Bowles, Cortland Sutton. Who's missing? Who's missing from this list? I mean, really. I can't think of anybody. Well, wait, Will Lutz. Where's Will Lutz? Could that be who they were asking about? Are we really talking about the snub of a kicker? I don't know. I have to go back and listen. I don't know that maybe Will Lutz, but Cameron Dicker isn't. Have you seen the season that Cameron Dicker's putting together for the Chargers? He's deserving. You only take 1 kicker. You want 3 kickers just so Will Lutz can get? I think that's fair. And I think you could say that all of them are deserving of getting in. The only one that I was like, I even gave a second thought to was Cortland Sutton. But I mean, without him, the Broncos would never convert a 3rd down. So I see the validity of putting in Cortland Sutton. And who got snubbed off of this list? Nico Collins, Jamar Chase, Zay Flowers, Cortland Sutton. Like, who's the snub there? So I think all the Broncos guys that are being selected to go, we'll see how many of them actually show up. I think they're all deserving, and I don't see anybody on the Broncos roster that got snubbed here. But the quarterbacks in the AFC, Allen Herbert May, works for me. Taylor Shannon Cook for the running back. Patrick Ricard for the Ravens. Is that what it is? Nate Atkins needs to get in there. Tight end Bowers and Kelsey. Now that's the one. That's right away. Like, I'm looking through these and I'm saying they're all. Travis Kelsey is popularity contest. Yeah, I picked that out right away. That's why Travis Kelsey's going to the Pro Bowl or getting voted into the Pro Bowl. And you know why. You know why. So there's 1 or 2 of them all the time in every sport. Travis Kelsey's the one I pick out when it comes to the AFC. Bowles, Dawkins, and Alt. Although, how long has it been since Joe Alt has played? So that might be one. Maybe there's another tackle. Meinerz, Nelson, and Trey Smith. Creed Humphrey. See, this is where it's... And here's the conspiracy. So I'm on Yahoo, and I'm just scrolling through these. Because I know what you're thinking. Go ahead. Say it out loud. How many Chiefs are in the Pro Bowl? How many Chiefs got picked for the Pro Bowl? Not Mahomes, but how many others? I know you were keeping track. This Yahoo article that I see literally lists Tyler Lindenbaum, who is the second center to go in with Creed Humphrey. They list him as Chiefs Tyler Lindenbaum, Baltimore Ravens. So Tyler Lindenbaum is not going. Only Chiefs Tyler Lindenbaum is going to the Pro Bowl. But I know what you're thinking. Yes, probably that you could look at many of the Kansas City Chiefs, although Creed Humphrey is the best center in this sport, and I will not hear any counter arguments. Trey Smith is a terrific guard. I'll tell you where they went off the deep end. If any Chiefs tackle were to have gotten in, that is a sham and a farce, and they should just cancel the Pro Bowl. There is no Kansas City offensive tackle that deserves to go. And there's a joke there about if Jawan Taylor would have been voted in, he would have left early for the Pro Bowl. You know, Chris Jones got in. See, that's another one. Chris Jones has had the conversation about Chris Jones this year has ranged from he is washed to he's having one of the most difficult seasons of his career. And he's not only one of the defensive tackles. I think he got more votes than Zach Allen. If they're listing him in order of how many votes that they got. Chris Jones has had one of his worst seasons. The Chiefs have had one of their worst seasons in forever. Not in forever, like a decade. But to me, I have completely shut off the part of my brain that remembers anything before that Week 17 matchup at Mile High that I took my dad to, where Patrick Mahomes took the field for the first time going against Paxton Lynch and the Denver Broncos. Anything that happened before that, I don't remember. Never happened. James Harrison beating Eric Fisher to sack Alex Smith, completely forgot about it. Chiefs trying to throw it to Tony Gonzalez in double coverage against the Broncos late in the 90s. I don't remember that either. But the Chiefs, that's the easy thing. I look at this list and I say, if there are any names that stick out to me that probably shouldn't be getting in, and it's Kelce and Chris Jones. Although there were moments where Travis Kelce was the only person that Patrick Mahomes could throw to. So why not pile on? Chiefsaholic is in prison. The Chiefs are moving across the border to Kansas. Chiefs are missing the playoffs entirely. Patrick Mahomes has a torn ACL. And yes, they're getting undeserving Pro Bowl votes. Just pile it on. 719-247-1313. But again, 6 Denver Broncos elected to the Pro Bowl. No notes. They all deserve it, and nobody got snubbed. Nick Benito, Zach Allen, Quinn Meinerz, Pat Surtain, Garrett Bowles, and Cortland Sutton. We'll take a break, come back with the 3 stories that are driving the show right after this. Hello there. Welcome in hour 3, although it'll only be a half an hour. Nuggets and the Fighting Cooper Flags coming up at the bottom of the hour. Nuggets on the second night of a back-to-back. David Adelman talked about the schedule being a little unfair to the Denver Nuggets. Played last night. Get to that game momentarily. They play Dallas tonight. Then they're off tomorrow. They play Minnesota. That game might tip off at 11 p.m. on Thursday. I just want to let you know, best laid plans, the entire day always runs long. It's going to be a very late night if you want to watch Nuggets Wolves. And then they travel to Orlando and have to play an early game Saturday against the Magic. Not ideal. Also, no one wants to hear the traveling problems of an NBA team, but I thought David Adelman was kind of right on in his assessment of the situation. But Nuggets, second night of a back-to-back as they take on the Dallas Mavericks. Cooper Flag, worth the price of admission. He's been really good. And we'll see what he does against the Denver Nuggets tonight. Speaking of the Nuggets, again, they are one of the 3 stories that are driving the show that I'd like to get to right now. Why don't we just start there, shall we? Here is the Denver Nuggets and our number 1 story.
Watson back over to Jokic, whips it in the corner, three-pointer Johnson. Got it again! Cam Johnson on fire in the first half tonight for Denver. He's 5 of 5 from downtown.
Cause on the call for the Altitude Sports Network. The Nuggets hit a franchise record 24 3-pointers and their absolute beatdown of the Utah Jazz, 135-112. Cam Johnson, you heard him hit 5. He hit 6. 6 for 6, Cam Johnson was. Jamal Murray was 6 of 12. Peyton Watson was 3 of 4. Tim Hardaway Jr., 6 of 11. And the biggest slacker in the three-point shooting, well, Spencer Jones, because he was 0 of 4. But Nikola Jokic only hit 1. And yet he still ended up with 14 points, 13 rebounds, and 13 assists, and he didn't even play in the fourth quarter. And last night, if you want the consequence of last night, there is none. It's the Jazz. But if you are going to tune into a game with the Denver Nuggets taking on a team so far beneath their station that you're actually questioning your life choices, that in the middle of the holiday season, when you could be out shopping for more presents or spending time with your family that has come into town just to see you, and you're sitting watching the Nuggets playing the Jazz, at the very least, you like to tune in and see the Nuggets do something historic. If you're going to tune into the Nuggets and the Jazz, you don't want to be infuriated by the try-hard Jazz giving the Nuggets all they can handle. You want to see the Nuggets absolutely beat down the Utah Jazz and do something they've never done in the history of their franchise. And they did that last night, so it was worth watching. But if you want like long-term, what does this mean? Nothing. It means nothing. It's Utah. We already knew Jamal Murray can make threes. We know Cam Johnson can make threes and Tim Hardaway. The Christmas game is going to be an important one. And there'll be some takeaways from tonight's game. But last night, it's the Jazz. So good on the Denver Nuggets for doing something that made it worth watching, because can't say that a game with the Utah Jazz is going to make me feel some kind of way about the Nuggets' chances of winning a championship. Here is story number 2, also from last night.
Shotgun snap to Purdy. 5-man rush. Cocks his arm. Throws. Goal line. Caught. Touchdown. Grab McCaffrey. just inside the pylon on the near sideline at the goal line, a 9-yard strike.
Kevin Harlan on the call for Westwood One Sports. You heard it right here on Extra Sports 1300. It was interesting for a little while. Phillip Rivers tossed a couple of tutties, and then the 49ers went, oh, yeah, we're the 49ers. And they absolutely boat raced the Indianapolis Colts last night as Brock Purdy throws a career-high 5 touchdowns in the 48-27 win. And with that win, the 49ers' chances of getting the number 1 seed are entirely in their hands. They got Chicago and they got Seattle, 2 teams also vying for the top seed in the NFC. They beat them both, and they will host all the playoff games in the NFC, including the big one that just so happens to be at their stadium in February. I am running out of superlatives to describe the job that Kyle Shanahan does on a year-to-year basis. Because there were long stretches of this season in which Mac Jones was the quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. And we see throughout the league, in last night's opponent is a perfect example of this. The Indianapolis Colts took one look at what they had on their roster and dialed up an Alabama zip code and asked one of Phillip Rivers' 10 children if their dad was available to talk to them, and they brought back 44-year-old Phillip Rivers. That's how bad some teams are when it comes to quarterback, and yet Kyle Shanahan rolled through like half of the season with Mac Jones, and this team is still standing with a chance to be the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. It's remarkable what this guy just continues to be able to do regardless of who his quarterback is. Now, I understand it hasn't gotten them to the ultimate prize, but there aren't at least half of the coaches in this league could not do what Kyle Shanahan seems to do on a regular basis. And it's not just the quarterback position. Like, they have George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey right now. Do they have them on a week-to-week basis? They've lost Nick Bosa. They've lost Fred Warner. They lost Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw in the offseason. And I guess you got to give some credit to Robert Saleh and all of this too, but it's Kyle Shanahan's staff, and it's led by him. And this 49ers team, despite all of that, has a chance to clinch the number 1 overall seed. It's remarkable. But I also had this feeling watching that game last night. There is a clear difference between Mac Jones and Brock Purdy. As much credit as you want to give Mac Jones, and certainly as much credit as you want to give Kyle Shanahan for what he is able to do, no matter who his quarterback is. You can see the difference. The idea, if it needs to be debunked, allow me to debunk it now, once again, and hopefully once and for all. Brock Purdy is not just another one of the quarterbacks on the 49ers assembly line. He is more. Is he enough for them to win a title? He hasn't been yet. But I don't know if you followed the NFL. There have been like 2 quarterbacks who have won Super Bowls lately. That's an exaggeration. But the last 30 years of the NFL have been dominated by 2 quarterbacks. So there are a lot of teams, including the 49ers, that can't say they have a Super Bowl winning quarterback on their roster. But there is a marked difference between these guys that fill in for Brock Purdy and Brock Purdy. And there will come a day and there will come a time this season where Brock Purdy, and probably in the playoffs, where Brock Purdy is not enough to overcome the the losses that the 49ers have had, either via free agency or injury on the defensive side of the football. And there will come a time where Brock Purdy is like that meme of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air where Will is standing in the middle of an empty living room. Is Brock Purdy capable of carrying a team like that? I don't think he is. But he's more than what I think a lot of people would make him out to be. And he's more than Mac Jones. So it's the brilliance of Kyle Shanahan coupled with a quarterback that is maybe not elite, but when he's right, like he has been the last 5 weeks, I mean, put him in that group with Lawrence and with Goff and Nix and May at this point, and the kind of this huge second tier of quarterback. Brock Purdy can be about the best of them. And he was on his game last night. Now to the team that calls Colorado home. Story number 3. Here's Sean Payton from earlier today.
It's a good offense we played, and man, we didn't do enough on our side of the ball. Our numbers third down wise. So that wasn't just one phase of our team. We got beat. We talked about it. And then we get the corrections made, and then we get on to the next game.
Sean Payton doesn't want you to put it all on Vance Joseph in the defense for the loss to Jacksonville, and nor should you, because I think Sean Payton is spot on. The offense has culpability in this. We talk about complementary football, how one side of the football feeds into the other. The struggles that the defense had against Jacksonville, some of them can be tied to the offense. But I want to zoom out a little bit, because what is happening with the Broncos defense looks like what happened to the Broncos defense late last year. Remember the Jerry Jeudy revenge game. Remember the primetime matchup with Joe Burrow. Of course, culminating in what happened in the first round of the playoffs. Last year, we saw a Broncos defense that was really, really good for the vast majority of the season, and right near the end started to look different. And we're seeing that again with this Broncos defense. Think about that Packer game if you just went in with a scalpel and removed the Pat Surtain interception. Like, he gets credit for the interception, and the defense absolutely helped the Broncos beat the Packers. But think about everything else that happened in that game. The Packers were kind of getting the better of the Broncos defense. And then you go back even further and you go, why did Marcus Mariota have as good of a game against the Denver Broncos defense as he had? I think you're seeing a defense that is starting to taper off at the worst possible time. And the reasons are numerous. What Sean Payton talked about there. The offense not holding up their end of the bargain. Putting the defense on the field more. This defense, to me, just to boil it down, this defense is wearing out. They're allowing opponents to get into the red zone more. They're allowing opponents to score more. And the visual evidence of this are all the missed tackles against Jacksonville. Broncos look like a defense that was missing something. I think it's energy. I think they have been carrying, I mean, the way that the Broncos play and how many close games they're in, how many times they've had to depend on the defense to keep a game close, maybe even to win a game for them. That's catching up to them. And then you throw on top of it a defense. Here's the one thing about the defense where I'll put it on the defense. They don't create turnovers. So they're not, the offense is getting them back on the field sooner, but also the defense isn't getting off the field sooner because they don't create turnovers. You just have a bunch of ingredients here that mixed in makes for a very worn down Broncos defense. And that's why the Broncos absolutely must hang on to this number one seed. They absolutely have to. For the home field advantage, absolutely. For the bye week. If the Broncos want any chance to be at their best, to be right, whatever that looks like in your mind, to get the Broncos right for their playoff run, they need that bye. If they don't, then this defense, I think it might get worse. And that's not a good ending to the Broncos story if that were to happen. I think that the Broncos need that second bye. And the offense can do their part by controlling this game on Thursday. It's not a bye, but the Broncos should win and should win comfortably. Give the defense a break. And then maybe they could be more rested for the Chargers with a bye week on the other side and a chance to recharge for this postseason run. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Got Dallas and Denver coming up at the bottom of the hour. So one more segment here on Extra Sports 1300. Nuggets and Mavericks coming up in just a few minutes. At least our coverage from altitude. Tip-off will be closer to the top of the hour. Speaking of the National Basketball Association, the NBA, and this, I have to say off the top that the NBA is the only sport that deals with this. You notice that? Like in this way. The idea of tanking. Or at the very least, because I think baseball, I think there is some feeling that there are teams actively tanking. But the spotlight is a little bit brighter on the NBA. But do we talk about tanking in the NFL? If anything, we talk about, and I heard Dan Patrick's Above the Noise commentary earlier on in the show, and he's talking about the Raider-Giant game on Sunday. The only tanking conversation that we really have in the NFL is, I want this team to tank. This team needs to tank. We implore teams in the NFL to tank. But there's not really a conversation about a team tanking. The NHL, there are absolutely teams right now tanking. And if they're not thinking about tanking, they should be. Because have you seen what Connor Bedard is now doing with the Blackhawks? Do you see what Macklin Celebrini is doing for the San Jose Sharks? Macklin Celebrini was in college like 2 years ago. And now the Sharks are a playoff team? There are teams that should be tanking in the NHL, and there are teams that are tanking. But you know why the NHL avoids this? Same length of the season as the NBA. Right? There could be tanking. There is tanking. What's the difference? In the NHL, players aren't sitting out. Not the way they are in the NBA. The problem with the NBA's tanking problem is that teams are so brazen about it. The NHL, it's a thing where they just don't have any talent. And maybe they make some trades. And it's funny, if you make a trade, you trade a star, you're not tanking, you're rebuilding. Well, what's part of that rebuild? Everyone looks at the prospects or the players coming back and say, well, they're rebuilding for the future. Well, at the same time, there are worse teams, so they'll get a better pick. That is tanking, but we call it rebuilding. But it's because at least the players that are on this NHL team that might be tanking, I'm not naming names, but look towards the bottom of the standings. You'll find them. But why are we not having a conversation about how much of a black eye this is on the league that Team X or Team Y is tanking in the NHL? Because at least the players they have on the roster are playing. When's the last time you saw Connor McDavid rest on the injury report? So this is a uniquely NBA problem because of that. Because there are teams that will take talented players that can help them win, and they will sit them. NHL, they just scrap all the talent from the roster. And there's another NBA-specific reason for this, that one player can impact the outcome more than any other sport. So it is a uniquely NBA problem. Tanking. Even though it exists in other sports, it's only a major problem in the NBA. Well, they're looking for ways to combat it. And I give them credit for throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks. Shams Charania reports, one, they are looking at limiting pick protections to either top 4 or 14 and higher, which would eliminate the problematic mid-lottery protections. Okay, nerd. I don't like that's not going to do anything for me. Second one, this one's interesting. No longer allowing a team to draft in the top 4 2 years in a row. Ding, ding, ding. There it is. The Rockies just dealt with this in Major League Baseball. It's not 2 years. And my guess is they'll look at 2 and they'll extend it if they decide it will be like 3 years or 4. The Rockies they just had the MLB draft lottery. The Nuggets or the Rockies, I'm getting my sports mixed up. The Rockies were unable to get the top pick because they have been so bad for so long. You and I know the Rockies aren't tanking. They just suck at their jobs. But the Major League Baseball has rules. The Rockies couldn't draft inside the top 10, even though they were one of the worst teams in baseball. This is it. This is the best idea they've got. And then you eliminate like the process with the Sixers. Right? 3-4 years in a row, we're just going to draft number 1 every year and see how it goes. No, you get your 1 year to tank. We can all acknowledge that tanking is a legitimate way of rebuilding your franchise. I'm not anti-tanking. I'm really not. But after a few years, it would wear on me. So you get your 1 year to get your Cooper flag or whoever that might be in this upcoming draft, and then you better get on with it because we're not going to let you, or it's 2 years, right? You're going to get, the Mavericks are going to get Cooper flag and whoever the top guy is in this draft. And then you're done. And then you got to figure it out. I think that's not the answer. That's maybe the best answer the NBA has come up with because there is no deterrent from resting players. There's no deterrent. Teams will rest players whenever they freaking feel like it. They will tank whenever they feel like it. Not allowing them to get that prize, the number 1 pick, or a top 4 pick. That might be the best idea the NBA has had under Adam Silver. I love that idea. Go for it. Figure out the timeline. Is it 2 years? Is it 3? Is it 4? Whatever it might be. But this is their best chance of deterring it. To say you got 2 years, because they know as well as you and I do, Team X is tanking. We can see it as plain as the nose on our faces. Well, not our own nose, but on other people's faces because we can't see our own nose. We know who's tanking. The NBA knows who's tanking, and they understand that is a legitimate way to try and rebuild your franchise. It is. It's not 100% effective, but it's worked for enough of them that this is your best answer. You get 2 years, tank, do all that stuff that fans hate. Make your roster devoid of talent. You'll be rewarded, quote unquote, with 2 top picks, and then you're done. And then you better figure it out from there. So, and on a positive note, the NBA has a good idea. Speaking of the NBA, Nuggets, Mavs, right now. Have a good night.